webinar. We sent you information, so at least you have a idea on where we are. Could we just kickstart? Nigel, nice to see you. Right. So we can see you now, Leonard.
Yeah.
Welcome to this webinar series. As you know, the headline says it all. You're talking about beyond remittances, and the webinar series is designed to think outside the box in terms of issues that we are facing in the Caribbean, particularly beyond remittance. You are an international banker. My name, you know, Nigel is on the other line, and basically, by way of introduction, it's important just to get a background about you and what you have done. In the last webinar, we did a sort of introduction that people were expecting to have you on board, and you're a person who have been in international banking for a number of years and what you have done. So if you give us a quick overview of your background to kickstart this series.
Well, let me tell you that I've, in addition to being the point person for National Commercial Bank in UK for the last 10 years. Before that, I worked in Jamaica, Egypt, Oman, Dubai, and Sri Lanka, so, in international banks. So briefly, that's my profile.
Yeah. So it's good. It's easy to say that you have a good experience and expertise in the whole idea of banking in various areas, from first world to emerging markets.
Yeah. Yes.
And the issue at hand now is that, as you know, in the Caribbean, you've been here long enough to be identified as a Caribbean man, I would think, of international experience. And you would have seen a number of issues that we have faced in the whole banking challenges that we face in the Caribbean. One particular area that we are focusing on is the whole idea of what's happening now with regards to banking regulations and third-party banks. And can you give us a sort of background of this and your views on some of the options that could be exercised as we face this dilemma?
Well, I don't think there are any major changes that took place recently, except for the fact that most of the banks are kind of correspondence banks, especially, strictly adhering to. But as a result, I see there are certain banks which are looking at their correspondent banking relationships thoroughly. So as a result, some of the relationships looks like are coming under review. I am not privy to some of the relationship reviews which has taken place, but I understand that there are certain institutions which are finding it difficult to maintain correspondent banking relationships. Being a bank ourselves, I know the tremendous pressure that correspondence banking banks, especially international banks out of UK and US, are exerting on Caribbean, Asian banks. So this has come as a surprise to some institutions, but I must tell you, NCB has not been affected, and we have a very strong relationship with our correspondence banks, both in US and UK, and our relationships with these banks have been excellent and will be so.
Just tell me, Leonard, on that score, do you have contractual arrangements that will support the fact that fact can give you confidence that you would not be affected in any way?
Well, a banker-customer relationship has its own contractual obligations on both parties. There are certain, as with any contract, there are certain notice period which either party has to give to terminate the contract. So nothing is to say that that you cannot close an account, or either party can give notice and close an account. So there is nothing to say that either the bank or the customer cannot close the account.
It is said that this is obviously the whole issue has come about because of concerns with regards to money laundering. And the other concern was raised because of the cost of maintaining these relationships. There were a number of ideas given why this has now become an issue. Could you identify or outline to us what are some of the real issues behind this?
Well, I really don't know how each bank looks at their relationships and their cost structure. But I can tell you from what I gather from my colleagues who are working in the banking sector here in UK, that some of the business models of these remittance companies and different jurisdictions does not fit into their overall business model. Secondly, remittances in a traditional form has been cash based. So most of this cash is collected by some of these commercial banks, and as a result, I can understand their cost per transaction is very high on these transactions. Simultaneously, if they look at the risk profile of these transactions and the customers, they perceive them to be high risk transactions and customers. So it's a perception, and they must be having their own reasons to do that.
From what you have known, has there been any recent cases of banks being penalized or being withdrawn because of these sorts of awkward transactions or these sort of relationships?
No, I have no idea.
Right, Dennis, let me just step in for a second. Thanks again. You might not quite know me, but I've worked with Dennis and Senator for a while now. My questions are more about what are the implications for individuals, for businesses, and for entrepreneurs of these new regulations. Because as you rightfully said, that your bank's got the governance structures and stuff in place, so this is not going to affect you in any significant way. And you also identified clearly that the cost of serving cash remittances is getting quite high for banks. About transaction cost because it's a human that has to handle cash, and a business perspective because these transactions are going to be flagged as potential money laundering. Is that a fair summary?
Well, firstly, let me I understand what your concern is. Firstly, if you are looking at some of these jurisdictions which are being affected, are high countries which are dependent on inward remittances.
Yes.
So these countries will be concerned.
Yes.
But it's not that there is no other avenue to send money to those countries.
Good.
There are so many avenues,
right.
So many ways of customers who can send money to those countries. Right. So to say that, well, because of this, the economy of these countries are going to go down is incorrect. Secondly, we as a bank, a national commercial bank, we have a subsidiary NCB Remittances. Our main concern is not main line of business is supporting the small and medium scale enterprises coming out of Jamaica.
Yes.
We support so many customers who import stuff from Jamaica and depend on effecting payments to the suppliers.
Yes.
So that hasn't been affected.
Excellent.
So yes, there will be customers who are affected because those customers who are being transacting with these institutions where the banks may take a view or decide that it's not profitable or it's not safe, the structures are not in place. Those customers will be in the short term affected, but they have other avenues. I mean, NCB is there. There are other institutions which will continue to do business.
Great. So from an export perspective, this shouldn't affect small and medium-sized enterprises at all. They have other ways in which they can work.
Remember, we are the only commercial bank out of Jamaica who has a representative office in UK.
Okay.
So our customers have been always been with us, and I'm sure we can accommodate some of the customers who will be affected, if at all.
And one more scenario before I turn you back on turn you back over to Dennis. If, for example, I was buying or trying to sell to a customer in China, let's say I'm buying something from China, and I have to go to an intermediary bank in China, would this be an issue for me as well if I were trying to import a container to Trinidad or Jamaica from China? Would that be an issue?
I don't know how these correspondence relationships are reviewed.
Right.
It is from bank to bank, institution to institution.
Okay.
So it doesn't mean that there are so many banks in Jamaica, so many institutions in Jamaica. Not all those banks have been affected. Not all those institutions have been affected. There will be where the governance structure is thorough, where they are comfortable with the business model. Correspondence banking will continue. Okay. It is the same with China. It is the same with Jamaica or Costa Rica or Sri Lanka or India. It is different institutions how the rules are being applied based on their perception about the governance and AML thoroughness of their AML procedures.
Great. Thank you. So back to you, Dennis.
Yeah, from that question, Leonard, could you talk us through some protocols and governance that a client, whether it's an SME or a normal personal client, should engage with when dealing with you and correspondence banks, so as to minimize any sort of concern regarding they being, disenfranchised?
Well, I mean, it is our responsibility to make sure that the sender and the beneficiary the KYC, the know your customer aspects are fulfilled. So as long as we can show to our correspondence banking banks that we are thorough in our KYC procedures and AML procedures, that's when they are confident that they are dealing with a legitimate and a safe institution. So I don't know, there is nothing a customer has to do, but it is always the institution which has to make sure that we take the necessary precautions to identify that the transaction is a legitimate transaction, and the customer from the send side and the recipient side is our legitimate businesses or transactions that are legitimate, basically.
Okay, on that score, is it tantamount upon you to give the customer sufficient information as regards providing effective or efficient KYC, as you put it, so that they know from beforehand that these are some of the expectations that you require, correspondent banks require, in order to to minimize risk?
Well, the basic thing is to make sure that we identify the customer who says who he is. And the basic, I mean, the identity, the certain documents which you take. So when the customer comes to register, we will say, please provide these documents.
Yeah.
It's not very onerous kind of document, just basic documents to make sure the person who is in front of us is the person who says he is.
Mm-hmm.
And the underlying transaction is what the transaction he says it is.
Okay. Especially small business, because what we have found is that, you know, especially SMEs, small business, people now starting up doing another banking transaction. Sometimes they find these requests not onerous, but they want to get a little more information on expectations. Yeah, and that is really the core of the question. Is it something? I'm sure you have ongoing information forums where you could get SMEs. I'm sure we would talk about that going in the future and engage them and say, okay, if you're doing business, these are the sort of things you need to, you know, to have in place, which makes your job easier and the client is more informed. And of course, with the regulators at the end of the day, will be less nervous, because they know that you are kind of the right sort of checks and balances and systems to ensure that everything remains kosher.
The documents which we require from any SME or an individual is no different from that from those documents which they will provide to their bankers. Period. So there is not onerous documents. It will, I mean, if you go to open an account, what documents would you need? You wouldn't ask anything more than that.
Okay. Now, taking the conversation a bit further now, you deal with SMEs on a large scale, you know, globally and of course in the Caribbean. So this is a good opportunity to tap from you do's and don'ts, and of course some of the pitfalls that you have seen some of these SMEs, particularly in our diaspora, Leonard, who struggle for a number of reasons, and transactional as part of also how they structure the business, and of course banking and finance is a critical part of it, the critical part of any business success. What sort of we want you to give some takeaways here. What sort of items of failures you see coming up in front of you on a continuous basis that you can say share with potential small business that can minimize failure going forward?
Well, I can relate to some of the problems with regard to money transfer to Jamaica. I cannot at this moment tell you
Leonard's frozen.
Yes.
He's moving slowly.
from London to Birmingham to Leeds. But most of the SMEs which we deal with are those customers who bring import stuff, fruit stuff, and other things from Jamaica and who have to make payments. Yes. So in that aspect, what happens is instantaneous. So if a customer comes and wants to get down a key or something, they come in the morning and make the payment through us in the morning, and the money is with the supplier instantaneously. Right. So if he makes the order and makes the payment today, the supplier can ship the goods the same time, the same flight commercial bank or anybody can offer, because it takes a couple of days. Okay. And it's cheaper to send money because, as you know, we only send money to our NCB customers. Yeah. So they know that once the money is come, the money will be in goods. In UK, that's a different matter altogether, because SMEs, the problems which SMEs face is no different from in London that from in Kingston. Different different conversation altogether. How they keep books, how they business continuity, how they take facilities, all those things matter because SMEs are not sophisticated employers or businessmen. So that's a different discussion we will not be able to touch today.
Yeah.
But as far as money transfer is concerned, if any customer wants to say import stuff from Jamaica, I think we offer the best way forward. And this is a positive on their cash flow because they don't have to block their cash flow for a couple of days.
Okay. So as far as you're concerned, this whole issue that has been raised and been spoken highly about in the media and by prime ministers and finance guru is all more scaremongering, scare tactics, is it?
It's not. No. I don't want to downplay that, but there are probably institutions which have been affected, which has large clienteles. So I'm sure there are institutions which have been affected, and that those institutions rightly are making their position known. But to say that because of these measures taken by these correspondent banks, that the entire economy of some of these countries are going under the sea, no, that will not happen.
Okay. And finally, before we cut, just a question on my mind is that I think that this can provide, and again, based on the topic of our program and the byline, beyond remittance, I think it's a good opportunity that, well, don't look at it that way, but when these things happen, you get an opportunity to think outside the box, to be more creative, to be more dynamic in how you do your business. Would this be an opportunity you will see in disguise?
Yes, it's an opportunity because when you have a stronger bank, NCB is a strong financial institution. We have the best corporate governance, which I have seen in that many places. We have a excellent KYC and an AML regime. That's the reason why most of the banks are showing confidence in NCB and its subsidiaries. So yes, we probably will have an opportunity here, but we are not going to kind of change our business model to grab any of the businesses which, if at all, fall through. No, we will make sure our primary objective is to service national commercial bank customers, and that is our main objective. We are not a money transfer company. We are a subsidiary of National Commercial Bank, based in UK, and our main objective is to support those customers, support exports out of Jamaica, and we'll continue to do that. And that's our clientele. That is the clientele we are going to service.
Leonard, thanks a lot for that. I mean, it has been very informative. I think it was very dynamic, and I can see some important takeaways here, Nigel.
Yeah.
The importance that just to recap, Leonard, the fact that we're looking at this thing beyond remittance. You have added a whole new freshness to the conversation, unlike most others who are looking to doom and gloom. So from that perspective, I think this was a very insightful discussion.
But before we move on, Dennis, I mean, you sent me a couple of articles which I saw, but has this become a huge discussion point because I don't see that discussion so so much in UK so far, but has become a big issue.
It has become a big issue, as you can see from some of the articles. The prime ministers are writing about it of Antigua, and so a lot of the OACS countries, a lot of the Caribbean countries are talking about it. So maybe in the UK, it may not be as a massive issue than getting out of the EU, for instance. But definitely in our part of the world, as you can see from the articles, when a prime minister is making that a top priority, and a number of people in that kind of ilk, it is a big issue.
And it's not just the Caribbean diaspora alone, the African diaspora and Indian diaspora are also talking a bit about it because, you know, there's a lot of uncertainty around this. When there's change, there's uncertainty. So people aren't entirely sure how this would affect them in sending money back to their families or paying for things back home or in their home countries. So, of course, you're providing some much needed clarification on this issue. For a lot of people, this won't have a significant effect. And even if it does, there are alternatives. But the conversation so far, a big part of it is, as Dennis said, doom and gloom. So you've already provided a new perspective on the issue.
Yeah, but I think going forward, there will be a distinct distinction between institutions and financial institutions which are governed properly, and institutions which the correspondent banks are not happy with. Period. These are the two distinctions that's going to take place.
Right.
All these years, I think we have been having a kind of a regime where everybody was doing business, and there was not much of pressure from stakeholders.
Yes.
Today it's different.
Yeah.
So going forward, there will be whether it's I'm not going to talk, I can't talk. I'm not qualified to talk about Antigua or Trinidad or Barbados, but I can talk about Jamaica. I think Jamaica will continue to have avenues to receive the remittances without any hindrance.
Great.
Great, Leonard. Of course, as you know, this is an ongoing series, so we'll be doing a different perspective in terms of investment and trade, and NCB being one of the big players in the Caribbean, there are so many different components of NCB that covers the wide spectrum of investment and banking that we, from time to time, we would seek clarification, and of course to hear how you're getting on and how we can engage in assisting the education process and the development process of Caribbean business and investment going forward. So we really appreciate your time, Leonard, and as Nigel said, to add clarity to this thing and to bring a perspective that I think is well needed. Yeah. And we are just a conduit. We are just messengers, Leonard, just to give you a perspective, and we are here to engage with experts and get more information and get clarity so we can assist the region in developing their investment portfolio, the banking relationship, and create dynamics in terms of the enterprise network, which is what we are, Caribbean Enterprise Network, and sticking with that vision. So it's exciting to have this and to have you here and to share those invaluable information and views and takeaways with us. So thanks again on behalf of SEN, and Nigel, of course, will have some closing items on that.
Well, again, just to echo Dennis, thanks again. And we'd love to have you back on again as we deal with other financial issues, because we have a big trade and investment segment coming up a bit later on, and will probably coincide with Diaspora Week. And having a discussion with you in terms of financial issues that affect exporters would be a great discussion for us to hold around that time period.
Another key area to end the point is that, as you're well aware, the Jamaica Stock Exchange has been voted the best performing exchange in the world last year, which brings a whole dynamics to the whole area of opportunities in investment and scaling that, not only from Jamaica perspective, but from the Caribbean region's perspective. And that's another area we'll be looking to go into to just, again, to add clarity, to inform and educate and get people to understand the dynamics of that and how they, the diaspora and the global market, looking at the Caribbean, because we are all about that, and the Caribbean interests could help to leverage that and to build our region going forward. And that's a massive one for us. The fact that it's like Usain Bolt winning the gold medal again. You know, we have a number one in the world. And again, Jamaica. So, you know, it's interesting. It's interesting. As Nigel said, going forward, it promises to be of great interest. And we know that we're already getting a lot of traction for this, what we're doing here, because it's a massive need, as you can see. A massive need for that sort of information and dissemination of information and perspectives from people who are in the know. So, you know, we sometimes we take half-baked things and it becomes a reality. You know how it is, Leonard.
Yeah.
So it's important to get people like yourself who are sort of expert, have many years experiences in this, not only in the region but globally, to give us the real spin on what's happening. So we're speaking from a position of strength and the experts in the field. So thanks once again.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Cheers.
All right, take care. All right, thanks. Bye.
Okay.